Are you a romance reader? I am. I mean, I read all genres, but I love romance. Contemporary romance, fire. I would say it's a guilty pleasure, but I feel no guilt and no shame. I love my romance. So when I was about, I don't know, 15 or 16, I was reading Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice, and my aunt asked me if I had read the Sleeping Beauty series yet. Now, I had read other romances before, mostly like Harlequin romance, things a little more prosy, more floral, a little more closed door, nothing quite so in your face. Now, I'm going to be 100% open and honest with you guys. I do not think at all ever should children be reading these graphic kind of novels. Not graphic novels, because who doesn't love a comic, but, you know, these graphic novels. But I was as a child, and that's not a flex. And I know it sounds super hypercritical, but really it's not a flex. If you're not 18 or older, don't consume this content. It's not for you. But I was reading things like Flowers in the Attic, just like the rest of my generation, at like 11. So, you know, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, the early 90s, we really didn't have a lot of supervision. And if we were reading a book and not listening to any of that devil's music, our parents were kind of cool with it. So I read anything and everything I could get my hands on. I did actually read the Sleeping Beauty series, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember it. I really don't. I'm a huge Anne Rice fan. I always have. I've read almost everything she's written except for the last one, which I think was Hearts in Atlantis. I started it, but it was due back at the library before I finished it. I never picked it up again. I didn't mean to DNF it, but I did. So around that same time, a friend of mine was like, "Oh, you should read this book." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And no, this is not a book review. Today, we are talking about the story behind the story of O, here on Gigi Says What Now. Now, I read the story of O after my friend suggested it to me, recommended it to me, and at 16, I should not have been reading that book. I read it the one time, and here we are, 33, 34 years later, and I'm still a little shocked by it, and there are still a few scenes that actually stuck with me. Goodness, it's hot as hell. I'm sweating bullets in here, I swear. Okay, so, I'm sorry. If you're like a member of like Toastmasters International or have done any kind of studying on public speaking like I have many times throughout my life, my use of the word "so" probably drives you crazy. But like some old women put on their red lipstick before they put on the coffee, if you know, you know. Other old women don't come on the internet without wearing a filter and start every sentence with the word "so." It's me. I'm some old women. So, in September of 1907, a woman named Anne, I can't speak French for shit, sorry. Her last name is spelled Desclous, Desclous. Anyway, in September of 1907, little Anne was born in France. She was born to a bilingual family that spoke both English and French. So as you would expect from a young woman born in 1907, she grew up very prim and proper and modest. She would grow up to be an editorial secretary as well as an author within her own right. Now, being bilingual and an editorial publisher, she would translate works by Virginia Woolf, T.S. Eliot, Anyway, sorry. F. Scott. It's F. Scott. I can fucking speak, I swear. F. Scott Fitzgerald. About a Great Gatsby moment. And she would go on to critique and serve on the jury for several different literary awards. She was definitely a prominent presence in the world of literature. So one night, her boss, who turned into her lover, told her that women weren't capable of writing. What's the proper way to say this? I can't use the E word. The S word is kind of frowned upon too. Explicit romance. Women just weren't, they couldn't do it. They weren't capable of it. And she was like, bet. He was 23 years older than her, by the way. So under the pseudonym Pauline Raege, Reage? That's not very, under that pseudonym, however you say it, in 1954, she published a very graphic S&M novel. Basically, the overall tone of the novel was happiness is in slavery. So this book was highly controversial. It is today. I can't even say these words on this video. Can you imagine what it was like in the 1950s? Of course, in America, Americans have always been a little bit more prudent than the French, but even in France, it was one of those things that was talked about behind closed doors, if you get what I'm saying. But it was a commercial success. But who the author wasn't known. Nobody knew who the author was. Everyone, absolutely everyone, thought it was a man. Her boyfriend and boss, he knew because he published it for her. But nobody thought it could possibly be her, of all people. And they didn't really think it was him either. But everyone talked about this book, and everyone thought it was written by a dude. I mean, after all, she was smart and demure and prudish. And, you know, maybe it was Andre Morlou or Henry de Motherland. I can't say these French names to save my life, and that's so sad considering I'm an American-born French immigrant. But yeah. But y'all, this book was so shocking that it brought obscenity charges. But they were brought against the publisher because she had written it under pseudonym and nobody knew who she was. So they could only bring the charges against the publisher. Now, they would later be thrown out of court in 1959. But the book did face a ban. And by court order, the sales of it for anyone under 18 was strictly verboten. And that's kind of a decision I kind of stand by. Like, please be an adult when you read this content. So in 1967, the conclusion to the story of O was published. And it was published under her pen name. But let me tell you, y'all, she didn't write it. She didn't have anything to do with it. So it wouldn't be until 1979 that an English edition would be released. And it was released by Viking Press. Shout out to Viking. All of my first edition Stephen Kings from the late 70s and early 80s were published by Viking. Anyway, 40 years after the first edition was released, there was an interview in the New Yorker where she revealed, actually I wrote that. The story of O is mine. I wrote it. Now, in her lifetime, she did have a relationship with a historian by the name of Edith. Many people think that Edith was her muse for the FMC in the story of O. Fun fact, my grandmother, her name was Edith, and that's also my middle name. So, In 2007, 8 years after her death, the National Leather Association, or is it the International Leather Association? Anyway, she was awarded for her excellence in leather writing. Anyway, and she was induced into the Leather Hall of Fame for her work in the Story of Ann. In 1955, she won a French Literature Prize. In 1965, the New York Times called the publication a significant event. And if you read contemporary or dark romance today, you can definitely thank her for kind of opening that door wide open for us. In 1979, a short was made based on the writer and director's inspiration that came from his introduction to the novel. In 1984, the Story of Ann Chapter 2 was written and directed and produced. In 1992, a 10-episode miniseries was made. In 2002, another adaptation called Untold Pleasures was released. In 1975, the story would be adapted into a comic that would later be parodied in 2007. In 2002, a documentary including mixed interviews and reenactments dove into how the book was written. There was another made for the BBC Radio. In 1997, a documentary, I can't say the title of the documentary, but it would end up being the last interview that Anne would give. In 2018, Shy Girls O was also inspired by the book. So I love saying it that way. That's how my family said it. Edith Thompson. She was born January 23rd, 1909, and she lived until December 7th of 1970. She was a novelist, an historian, and a journalist. In 1946, they met through Anne's much older than her age gap boyfriend / boss at the beginning of the war. Because they were both members of a resistance group, the war being World War II. They were both members of a resistance group that had a name that translates to the Writers National Committee. And so she would meet Edith through her boyfriend, Jean-Paul, and Edith would also become her lover. So this book, oh wow, some of these filters, y'all. I mean, my teeth aren't white, but down. Okay, so let me get way off topic. And oh my God, I got this new conditioner, you guys, and it smells so good. It's like strawberries and cream, and I'm absolutely obsessed with it. I would tell you what it is, but then you're gonna be like, that should cost $1, and I'm gonna be like, yeah. Anyway, the cover of this book has so many different covers from over the years. Of course, the book is 70 years old now, 65, 70 years old. So it's had and it's been published in like every language ever, not literally, but almost. It's had so many different covers. The cover of the one that was lent to me at the ripe young age of 15, 16-ish looked like this. So the novel still is available today. You can pick it up on Amazon. My personal library has an audio version of it that I could go check out right now, which I think is amazing. It is available in English, French, and Italian. The World Press said it is the most read French book outside of France. I recommend that you check out the Story of Ann, because without it, quite honestly, the contemporary romances we read today, I know I said it in the beginning of the video, but it deserves repeating, would not exist today if it weren't for Anne. I can't say her last name. Thank you so much for joining me today on Gigi Says What Now. If you are new here, I do hope you'll hit that subscribe button and come back, because I will come back with more stories and we will talk more trash on historical events, people, literature, mythology, folklore, you name it. If I can go down that rabbit hole, I'm probably going to do it because it's just a ton of fun for me. And of course, these videos are always for entertainment purposes only. I'm not a credible source, but research is fun. Remember, you're valid, you're worthy, and you're loved. Bye!